Hello, everybody. This is Appa Brian and my son, Justin Neely. And later we'll be joined by my son-in-law, Dan Mattingly, as we have been all through the year. This will be the last show. We're picking the Super Bowl, but before we get to the Super Bowl, Justin, let's talk about some NFL news. What do you think about the new Washington nickname?
I don't like it.
I'm sure Dan's going to hate it too.
I'd rather they just stay the Washington football team.
Yeah, a lot of the talk is the Washington commies, Washington comrades. I don't know how much money they spent to come up with this nickname, but they didn't get their money's worth.
No. I heard a comment by a longtime Redskins fan. He's like, I'm a Redskins fan. I don't care about this team. You've taken my team from me. I'll root for the Redskins.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel that way. Welcome to sunny Southern California and Super Bowl 56, and we're going to have Dan Mattingly, my son-in-law, join us at this time. And Dan, I've been talking with Justin, and you all and the subscribers know the drill. I splice Dan in with the picks, or Justin in with the picks, depending on who goes first, because you both work different shifts. Washington Commanders. What do you think about that?
I mean, is Russell Crowe going to be the mascot? Because if he could come out in the whole master and command outfit, that would be worth it. But outside of that, it's a pretty ugly uniform. It looks like something that they got out of I don't know, the misprints box at a uniform shop. I don't understand why they have a jersey that looks like a knockoff Steelers jersey with a W on the front. That didn't make a lot of sense. They tweaked the color just a tiny bit. And man, it like everything that the Snyder run Washington team has done, it's just not great. Not well thought out. They didn't want to get any of the best names because, you know, guys jumped on the trademarks and rights and all that kind of thing to make them kind of pay for it. But they couldn't stomach that, so they went with this. I guess what they can do, I was thinking about it, they could have a different ex-president come out and bang on a drum or something before the games.
There is more NFL news. Major lawsuit against the NFL, specifically against Miami Dolphins, New York Giants. There's a third team too. I forget who that is. Maybe Cleveland. I'm not sure. But Brian Flores, former coach of the Miami Dolphins, is suing the NFL based on racial discrimination, and he makes a case. And the main part of the case is the email from Bill Belichick that he accidentally sent, intended for Brian Daboll when he got hired for the New York Giants. But he sent it to Flores. Both of them are former assistants. And I can imagine they were probably 1-2 right on his phone list. And he accidentally sent this email a few days before the Giants announced the hiring of Daboll, and before they were doing their Rooney Rule token interview with Brian Flores, proving that it was a Rooney Rule token interview. Belichick already knew that the Giants were going to hire Brian Daboll. He was writing to congratulate him for that hire. And he also mentions that, and this is going to dovetail with some things we're going to talk about later, but he mentions that Brian Flores, coach of the Dolphins, was offered $100,000 to lose football games. His first year he was with the Miami Dolphins because they wanted the number one draft pick, paid $100,000 to tank and lose games. This happened in Cleveland. Since another black coach, Hugh Jackson, says that he was offered money to lose games. He wouldn't discuss it with Cleveland. So, we've always known baseball is there. About a third of the teams tank games to get better picks, and then when they get better picks, they underpay They don't pick the best players, and then they pay them in their first round. It's sickening how so many pro sports teams do lose on purpose. Now, it's hard to argue against the theory because here's the Bengals. They played the tank game 3 years ago and lost and got Joe Burrows. And then now 2 years later, they're in the Super Bowl. So, their theory works. But I think, Justin, the only way to fix that is to totally and this will never happen, but to totally revamp pro sports and take a hard look at the English Professional Soccer League. I'm not a soccer fan, but I watched it for a few years, and I love the way they handle it. There's 20 teams, no playoffs, no World Series, no championship. Whoever wins the regular season is the winner. And the 3 bottom teams drop out of the league. They call it regulation, and they go to Division II. And the 3 top teams in Division II go up to the major leagues. That's the only way to fix pro sport teams from tanking. And that would fix that. I think it's possible to fix. Yeah, the MLB totally redid the minor leagues last year. They have fewer teams. A lot of people complain about that, but they revamped the schedule to help the players and help the travel costs, to where they go to one city for 5 days, they play 5 games, have a day off, travel to another city, play 5 games. And that worked out very well. Both players liked it. The owners liked it. That was a major change. And what they would have to do is let the AAA teams be independent teams and open up the bidding to get players. And then when AAA teams, the top 3 AAA teams, like say Omaha or Memphis, are a top 3 team, they go to the major leagues. And the bottom 3 teams that are losing and tanking, they go down to to AAA. So that's how that would work in the major leagues. Football, it's going to be even more impossible to implement something like that because there is no minor leagues in football. It's all colleges. But that's the only way to fix the tanking.
Football's got competition coming up in April, and I'm going to be
what is that? The USFL?
Yep, I'm going to be giving that league a chance.
Yeah, I think
in my fandom, I'm going to give him a chance.
There's 8 teams, but they're all going to play in only one city. All their games are going to be in Birmingham. But it'll be interesting. I will definitely check them out. The racist lawsuit, I think there's a lot to it. You look at Jim Caldwell of Indianapolis and what he did for that team for 3 years, and Peyton Manning as a quarterback. Peyton Manning was throwing first 4 years, he threw 81 interceptions. And when he got with Caldwell as his OC and quarterbacks coach, he dropped his interception rate by 40%. And then Caldwell also did well with the Detroit Lions. I mean, he was 36-28 with the Detroit Lions. Ever since he was fired with the Lions, the white coaches are 17-46. So yeah, there's some. Look at Eric Bieniemy, who every year gets these token interviews, but no bites. And all Bieniemy has done is call plays for a team that's gone to 4 straight AFC championships. So there's one black coach in the NFL for a league that's got 65% players. Yeah, I think there's a lot to this. They're black. There's a lot to this lawsuit, and it could be kind of earth-shaking. I mean, they've had since 2003 to implement the Rooney Rule, and it's not working.
And you could argue that one black coach, Mike Tomlin, he doesn't really get the sort of attention for his successes and his struggles throughout the season as all these other established
he did a great job this year.
White coaches. Nobody really talks about him.
I know. Was it 17 straight years of winning, non-losing NFL? So you might have had some break-even years. I'm not sure, but never had a losing season in 17 years. And by the way, he was the youngest.
In these last 2 years, he's done it with a dead quarterback.
That's true. He was the youngest coach to win the Super Bowl at 38. His birthday's in March. Now this year, if Sean McVay wins it, he'll be younger. He's 36. And if Mac Taylor wins at Cincinnati, he's younger by 2 months.
So, I mean, if you look at the numbers and you look at really everything that's going on, guys aren't really getting fair shots. They're getting fired a lot quicker than some of their white counterparts, which I don't think is fair. Really, we've only got one black head in the league right now. And that's incredible to me. That and it seems like that rule is really not respected for the Rooney Rule, where you have to bring in diverse head coaches. They're afterthoughts. They've already made the decision. They've already interviewed the guy that they want, and they've got him on the books as hired, and they just bring in a guy as just, to observe the rule at its letter, instead of, respecting the idea behind it. I really think that Brian Flores is a fantastic coach. I really think that he should be a head coach in the NFL, and I doubt that the Dolphins are going to get anybody better than him. They just wanted it done differently. There was a big disconnect between him and ownership, it sounds like. And some of the things he says, I don't know that he'll be able to back up, but he has a good point. There are not enough black head coaches in the NFL for how many players we have playing. And, the fact is, Mike Tomlin's been the only one that's really caught on. Jim Caldwell, I don't think he got a fair shot at any of his stops. I think that the only other coach that's really had much success is Dungy. But he got bounced from Tampa for Gruden, even though he was a playoff winning head coach. So I think that we've shown that the NFL owners really don't feel comfortable, for whatever reason, employing people that aren't white. And that's a problem. I agree with some of the points.
Let's get to what we really want to talk about. And I don't want this to come across to our subscribers as sour grapes about Kansas City losing. It was a great game, wonderful season, and fun to watch. The playoffs were just terrific. But just go ahead and tell me what you said to me on a text before we started the show.
Well,
talk about.
I've just all week long, I've just been like, I can't believe what I just saw. And it's not, as you just mentioned, it's not really about me being a Chiefs fan. It's about the quality of the game that I was observing, and it just didn't seem like it was truly being played. It seemed as though it was set up, and in my opinion, what I think has been going on with the terrible officiating, and not only in Chiefs games, I believe the officiating in other games as well, has been setting this scenario up to make sure the Bengals go all the way to the Super Bowl, because, well, they don't belong there, first of all. And that makes the league feel safer, that they can give their Los Angeles Rams their home victory in the Super Bowl. In that city of LA, where they're struggling to sell tickets and they're really trying hard to establish the NFL in that city.
And built, a $1 billion stadium.
$5 billion stadium.
Yeah, $5 billion. They want this to work, and just like they want to work in Las Vegas. Giving a Pro Bowl to Las Vegas, and Las Vegas has got a Super Bowl coming up as well.
We all saw in the first half what I've expected, what everyone was expecting to see, that those were the true Bengals and the true Chiefs playing football.
Every Chiefs drive in the first half went to the red zone.
Yeah, and
Every Chiefs drive.
Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes were being themselves, and everyone was being normal. And but then the second half comes out, second half happens, and absolutely every poor coaching decision you can possibly make, Andy Reid pulled the trigger on it, and every poor quarterback decision you can possibly make, Patrick Mahomes took.
On that last play, when he was sacked and fumbled, early in that development of that play, did you see the overhead camera on where the receivers were? Travis Kelce was about a yard into the end zone. He was wide open.
Oh, there's
All he had to do was throw the ball, and we won the game with a touchdown on the last play of the game.
and before even that play, there were several of those kinds of scenarios. There was one of the plays that I rewatched where literally everybody was open at one point or another throughout the play. It was a sack. It took like 7 seconds
Yeah,
before
7
they sacked
seconds.
Mahomes,
Mhm.
and literally every Chiefs receiver or eligible ball carrier would have scored a touchdown
Yeah,
at
and
some point in that play.
I don't know if you watch Shaggy Shane. He's a YouTube channel in Kansas City. He's been on Patrick Mahomes ever since before we drafted him. And his show gets lots of views and he's got about 1,500 subscribers, or maybe 2,000 subscribers. I don't know. But he says he thinks Patrick Mahomes threw the game and just didn't want to keep playing. That's what he thinks. I think that he didn't throw the game, but I do think what we're talking about has a lot to it. And this Flores and tanking sheds a lot of light on the integrity of the NFL.
And it wasn't as blatantly obvious this time, but there were still officiating errors that were favoring the Bengals massively
Well, in the
in
first
this
half,
game.
those two non-grounding penalties where Burrows threw the ball straight down the ground, and there was not a receiver within
No
10 yards.
receiver even anywhere on the screen, nowhere within 15 yards.
Yeah, you're probably right, probably 15 yards. And there was no thought of a flag. Justin, there is a website called, it's by Brian Tuohy, Tuohy, and he's been on some TV shows and a lot of YouTube videos. But he wrote a book called The Fix Is In, and he wrote another book called The Fix Is Still In. And he wrote a third book, which I forget the title of the book, but he got over 400 FOIAs. And all these FOIAs are associated with FBI investigations on fixed games in pro sports, going back to the 60s, 70s, 80s, all through up to today. He's read every FBI investigation. And he has a website called thefixisn.net, where he routinely comments on things that are happening in pro sports. He believes, his basic theory is that since television has taken over the finances of pro sports, that basically TV runs the pro sports. Now, there's a law in the United States. It's called the quiz show game law, that you cannot fix quiz games like on TV, intelligence games. You can't fix those. It's against the law. But the courts consider pro sports as entertainment, and you can fix those. They're only doing entertainment. So since it's not illegal, his theory is, and he has tons of evidence and examples to show, obvious things like the Muhammad Cassius Clay Sonny Liston fight, things like that, where Liston was knocked out on a punch that didn't even hit him. But there's a ton of examples that he brings up in his books. But his theory is that the money in TV does not want to leave big events to chance, because millions of dollars are involved with these big events. In other words, by the time you get to Super Bowls and conference championship games, it makes a big difference. Like, for example, okay, when New Orleans suffered a pass interference penalty that kept them out of the Super Bowl in 2018. I think that was 2018. All the TVs in New Orleans were not watching the Super Bowls. I mean, they got only like about a 10% rating or something like that in that market, because everyone was so disgusted and they didn't care about the Super Bowl. And that cost a lot of money. That cost literally millions of dollars. So the TV ratings are kind of what's supreme. And his theory is they like to promote young and up-and-coming players like Mahomes when he was coming up, and Joe Burrows now. I also like to promote and got to get every last dollar out of superstars that are retiring, which is what you got going on now with the Rams. They've not announced their retirements, but they're definitely at the end of their careers. Von Miller, Odell Beckham Jr., Matt Stafford, and Aaron Donald. So it's kind of like getting the last big chunk of money out of them that they can get. Joe Burrow will have his day. There'll be more Super Bowls for Joe Burrow. So that's why I think the Rams are going to win the Super Bowl. And by the way, this guy predicted the Rams would win the Super Bowl in week 3. I was on the Rams before the season started. I thought it'd be the Rams and Chiefs, but for different reasons. It wasn't for this reason.
Yeah.
But for these reasons, he said in week 3, it'll be the Rams in the Super Bowl.
Well, I think he was right. I think the Rams are going to win too.
Yeah. I mean, you hate to see something like that. I don't know that I've ever seen a collapse like that out of a player that is so good, usually in the right situations. I mean, there were so many weird no calls that were really obvious, like hits out of bounds and stuff like that.
And the grounding, no grounding calls.
Yeah,
We'll go back to 15 yards.
There was a lot of bizarre stuff. I couldn't believe that our defensive line couldn't get. I mean, they could get pressure, but they couldn't get Burrow on the ground in the whole second half. It was bizarre. And that offensive line gives up sacks. And I was sick watching that team should be in the Super Bowl. The Chiefs should have won that game. I'm not big on doing the fix, but I mean, that's potentially, with the Rams, the most valuable franchise in the NFL if they can get people on board with it. That's the Lakers for the NFL if they can make it happen. And they've got the right coach there. I think Sean McVay's a fantastic coach. They don't have a Mahomes there. That's a problem.
He did get out. McVay did get out coached in Super Bowl 53 by Bill Belichick, and he admits that.
And most people get out coached by Bill Belichick.
I kind of see Justin's viewpoint because Andy Reid ran the ball 6 times in the second half. And our offense was running the ball well in the first half. McKinnon and Clyde Edwards-Helaire were running on first down, and they were getting 5 to 10 yards every time. And then in the second half, Bengals went to less of a rush and 8 back there, so we could automatically outrun them in the run. But we didn't run the ball one time on first down.
And Mahomes refused to scramble. Refused.
Well, he did kind of run around like he did in the Buffalo game, but he had people open that he could have thrown to. On that last play in regulation time, Travis Kelce was wide open in the end zone early in that play, and Mahomes didn't throw it. And it's just mind-boggling. He ran around for 6 seconds until he finally gets sacked and fumbled, and then we kicked a field goal to go into overtime. And then they did the 2 weirdest calls of the entire season, and what should have been the 2 most important calls. They tried to throw the ball to D-Rob, who dropped the pass in the first half, and they had no other targets. And they forget about Kelce. They don't run the ball in the overtime. Um,
Yeah.
It's Justice says, like Andy Reid did everything he could to lose the game.
It felt like it. Watching that second half, it really did feel like we were just
The papers in Kansas City say that our offseason challenge is to figure out why Mahomes suddenly turned into a head case. But I don't. I think he's better than that. So I'm kind of listening to Justin. There's a website called, and Justin and I talked about this, but it's called thefixisend.net. His name is Brian Tuohy, Tuohy, and he has a second book called The Fix Is Still In. And he has a third book. I forget the title of it, but he got over 400 FOIAs, and he studied all the FBI cases in pro sports where gambling was alleged, going back to the 50s, 60s, 70s, up to the present day. In fact, he asked for so many FOIAs. My wife would know about this because she handles them at her job. That he got himself on the FBI list with those 440 requests. But studying those, he has come to some conclusions, and I explained this with Justin. He said that when pro sports went to their biggest financial dependency on TV sports, the TVs then kind of took over and started calling the shots. So he believes, and he has a ton of support in his books and on his website with videos and all kinds of things, that the TV people don't leave the important games up to chance because there's millions of dollars involved. So he said the rules in the NFL, as far as the NFL goes, the rules were changed. It used to be in the 50s and 60s, you could murder people, basically, and get away with it. You could legally clothesline ball carriers. You could try to take out the quarterback, and that was the Raiders' goal. The big saying was the quarterback must go down. That was Al Davis. You could do all those things, but then they passed rules to tone some of that down. But what it does is it gives them control. Is it pass interference? Is it not pass interference? And they can use it in critical situations, third down situations, or drive extending situations, or drive ending situations, and virtually affect the game. And so on his website, he puts side by side penalties, some where they're ticky-tack and they're called the changing game, some where they're not ticky-tack and they don't get called the changing game. Lori and I were looking at that game last week and saying that, well, the referees aren't calling anything. And that was obvious, which was totally different than the Cincinnati game. Now, his theory is that the NFL favors young quarterbacks like Mahomes and Burrows as they're coming up, but they also like to have money. They see money-making opportunities in retiring old stars, which is like the Rams are kind of full of it. They're not retiring yet, but they're on the down backside of their career. There's at least 4 or 5 superstars on that team that don't have much time left. So it's kind of, he predicted after week 3 that the Rams would definitely be in the Super Bowl for that reason, that the NFL wants to kind of get a last gasp of all the money they can out of them. Plus they want to revive football or establish football in Los Angeles. So I think there is some truth to it, and it's given me some pause to wonder, for sure.
Sure. And I'm sure we all kind of know. I mean, the Rams have maybe 3 years, maybe, before most of these guys are gone, or they've become too expensive to re-sign. They've got no first-round picks for the next 6 years, I think. Mm-hmm. And most of their second-round picks are gone too. So if they can get these guys on a good 3-year run, I mean, that's what they're going to get out of them, because they're going to have to rebuild after that. And that's going to take a while without draft picks to replenish that roster. But when you have Aaron Donald and Von Miller and Jalen Ramsey and Cooper Kupp and Odell Beckham Jr., they got to add in the middle of the year, which seemed that one kind of stunk, didn't it? Like, he was looking at all these teams, and then all of a sudden, oh yeah, of course he was always going to pick the Rams. That was a little odd. So they've got more star power than any team. They've got more recognizable players than any team, and I'm sure the league would love for them to win the Super Bowl. And if Cincinnati wins, they've got the Joe Burrow piece that they can get behind. But man,
I'm picking the Rams because I think it's now or never for the Rams. This is their best chance, and their only chance to win it at home. And
this is the only time they might be the favorite
mhm.
in the Super Bowl because the AFC is so strong.
And when Justin says that he didn't think the Bengals deserved to be in the Super Bowl, I kind of think the Bengals are made to be bigger than they really are. I mean, the Chiefs' offensive line dominated their defensive line. I saw some pancake blocks. I saw some just pure dominance. And Hendrickson, at the end of the game, he was totally gassed. I mean, so gassed he couldn't be on the field for every play. When he played with energy and played well, but he was gassed at the end. So I think the Bengals are kind of made out to be bigger than they actually are.
Paper Tigers, I like it.
But I think the Rams are the real deal. I think they're going to win this game.
Yeah, I agree. I think they'll be in Burrow's face. I think it'll be an maybe evenly called game. The refs have taken control of the NFL in such a way.
Yeah, I'm so suspicious that my antenna's up.
Yeah, it's hard to watch, and it's so inconsistent. Like you said, week to week, you just don't. I don't get it. I'm like, oh, we're gonna lose this game because.
Tui says that there are games where when you got young quarterbacks like Brady or Mahomes or Burrows, where referee crews are told don't call any offensive holding penalties, to increase that quarterback's chances. That's how they affect games in fixed games. And it kind of makes sense. We all know about the Tom Brady rule on hitting the quarterback.
Right. Yeah, if you even come near his knees, then.
And don't look at him. You'll get don't look at him for more than 2 seconds, or you get a taunting penalty. That's happened.
That has.
Yeah.
What did you think about the Brady retirement? I was not too surprised after watching his body language in that last game he played.
Yeah, I was not too surprised. And, I think he's decided it's time to do his business interests and his family. And I get that. I mean, what else has he got left to prove in the NFL? I mean,
nothing.
No,
and they were going to have to blow up that team. Like, what's he going to do? Go to the Niners? I mean,
well, the Niners.
Another run and
yeah, the Niners wouldn't object because I think they're maybe kind of done with Garoppolo.
Oh, they're done. I couldn't see them rolling him out. That's a bit like the Goff situation last year, where it was like the Rams were done. They'd seen everything they needed to see. The coach was so fed up with just not being able to trust the quarterback to do anything for the team. And the defense, like, you can't waste a defense like that. And a player like Deebo Samuel, who practically carries that team. All of Garoppolo had to do was be competent, and he couldn't manage that. So I expect him to be maybe backing up Mills on the Texans next year. I don't know, something like that.
So we both think the Rams will win. We both think that they are the designated winners for this year's Super Bowl. I hope we're wrong. Maybe we'll get a real game, and Joe Burrows will work a miracle. But with that offensive line, and after I saw the Chiefs' offensive line dominate their defensive line like that, Burrows is amazing. We had him in our grass in the second half. Chris Jones had him a couple times. Melvin Ingram had him a couple times. He got away to extend drives. That alone won the game for Cincinnati. Just a couple of those plays there.
He's good.
He's great.
But I think he's been getting a lot of help this year, and not just from his team.
Well, that's the two games we saw. Well, no, the 3 games we saw. The was it the wild card game?
The Titans game.
Yeah, the Titans game with the inadvertent whistle, which he talks a lot about on his website. That was the NFL totally blew that off like it was nothing. But what happened was not the NFL rules, and not what they said. They said the whistle was blown after the play. That's their official explanation. But when you watch the video, it was before the play was completed, and the Oakland defender stopped.
Yeah, ball still in the air, and the Oakland defender
Number 25 stopped.
immediately stopped.
Yep.
Yep. And he would have. He was in position to make a play too, had the whistle not been blown.
Now, I'm not sure I would say that the referee did it on purpose to affect the outcome of the game, but the ruling, the way they handled that, affected the outcome of the game, and that was done on purpose.
And that was against their own rules.
Against their own obvious rules that everybody should know. We had one of those inadvertent whistles in the high school level, and that knocked us out of a playoff game. The guy, I think I might have mentioned this on the channel before, or we ran an option offense. The quarterback faked the handoff, and he's running 40 yards downfield for a touchdown. The referee blew the fullback down who didn't have the ball. And so here's our quarterback right across the goal line, nobody within 20 yards. And oops, we got to do the play over again. We blew the whistle too soon. And that knocked us out of the playoffs. I've had some referee crews as an athletic director that were outstanding, but there was one crew that was an outstanding crew. The head referee was an official in the CIF, actually a high up official. And he kind of lost control over his crew during the game. Our stands didn't have like a running track around the field, so our stands were right on top of the football field. And we had a lot of rabid fans at the game, and the pressure of the playoff game got to the referee crew, and they made two or three. One of the officials in particular made 2 or 3 really bad calls that cost us that game. And a couple months later, I had to go argue a case for a football player's eligibility. It was a hardship case, and before I sat down, I saw the guy that was hearing my hearing was that guy that was the referee. And before I sat down, he says, "Before you say a word, I know I owe you one." He goes, "I lost control of my crew, and we cost you a playoff game. You don't have to say anything. Your hardship case is granted." He did owe us one. Now, in the referee world in the NFL, Lori and I definitely noticed the conference championship game was being officiated differently than the last time we played Cincinnati. That was totally obvious. And early on, it was totally obvious that they were not going to call anything. So, yeah. Well, I might get some thumbs down on this video. It's controversial. And then a lot of people were saying in the comments, well, just sour grapes. You guys lost, and sour grapes. But you saw the game too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid did the best they could do to win that game.
Not in the second half.
You cannot tell me that.
Yeah. But you could tell me they did the best they could to lose that game.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we just spent 30 minutes talking about what they could have done to lose the game, and they did it. Yeah. Well, listen, it's been fun. And actually, it's been a great season in the NFL. But boy, this lawsuit and what we're seeing has kind of colored my thinking. I mean, I've always been kind of mad at modern day baseball because of so many teams tanking. It's going to be interesting to see how the NFL covers up this Brian Flores lawsuit, because this is explosive. It's damaging when fans know their own team is trying to lose on purpose. Some are good with it because they see what Cincinnati did. to rebuild their team, getting the best quarterback. But baseball, there's so many teams that do this every year. And we watched the Royals for decades that not only would they tank to get higher draft picks, they would get they draft number one draft picks, but they wouldn't get the best player because that means they'd have to pay them down the road. Yeah. Yeah, there's a whole line of Kansas City Royal number one draft picks of guys that you never heard of.
And then it's like, oops, this person we picked is actually good, so let's trade him away immediately.
Yeah. Jermaine Dye, before his career blossomed, just before it blossomed, Carlos Beltran, that we could sit here all day and talk about that. but so that's why I kind of soured on baseball. I have loved the parity in the NFL. I think the NFL strives to have parity that keeps interest in the league. And we've had a lot of close games, especially during these playoffs. They've been amazing. There's no denying that. But this guy says it's all through pro sports that's controlled by TV. And winners go. Another one example is whenever we had these like national disasters like 9/11 or Katrina or the floods in Houston, there's five of the last major catastrophes. Their home team suddenly had great success and won.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's a ton of interesting things on that website.
Well, one more time, what's the website's name?
Yeah, thefixisin.net. His name is Brian, Tuohy. Well, we've gone long. Hope you've enjoyed the show, and we'll splice in Dan Mattingly's comments in between. He may have an opposite take on what we have, although I think his take on the Washington Commanders will be pretty negative.
Yeah.
Justin, thanks for joining us. Have a good week.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So I'm picking the Rams. Stafford has had 34 fourth-quarter comebacks. That's fifth in the NFL history. And he's got the goods around him to do this. I'm picking the Rams. Who you got, Dan?
I've got the Rams as well. I think the matchup is good. The defensive line is going to have a huge advantage over a poor Bengals offensive line. I think that defensive backs, the only thing I'd be worried about is safeties. But if you take away Chase, it's going to be hard for Burrow. I love the Rams in this game. I think they'll win by at least a score.
They brought back Eric Weddle at safety, the Rams did, kind of on an emergency basis.
Yeah, and he made a bad hit last week. Did you see that? He came over, and luckily it was already incomplete, so it didn't count toward the end of the play. It was just taken away from him in field position. But, yeah, he had a really bad late hit, and that was his contribution last week. How have you thought he's played?
He's rusty. Yeah.
You have to be, though.
But I think it's going to be kind of desperate for Burrows. I don't know if he's going to get away from Von Miller and Aaron Donald like he did Chris Jones and Melvin Ingram.
And, well, Ingram was the only one getting to him, really. But, yeah, you're right. I think that those guys are going to play the game of their lives. They're hungry. I know Donald is for sure. Miller looks great, and Floyd on the other end. Whoa. I would not want to play them in a game at home that means this much to those veteran guys.
Well, I know you got to go pick up Lucas from basketball practice. Thanks for joining us all year. You were so faithful, and we enjoyed your input on the show. This is our last Pick'em show. Nothing left to pick. And there may be no baseball next spring either.
Right? Oh, geez. How do you think that's going to go? It doesn't look good.
No, they're trying to make a big push now to get started on time, but it's not happening. So, if they don't get started here in the next few days, spring training will be pushed back and that's going to necessitate pushing back the season also. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, it'll be back someday. I hope. We'll maybe pick a couple football games here this summer.
Someday. Thanks, Dan.
Oh, hey.
I've enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
been a heck of a season.
Yeah.
Bye.
But our offensive line was pancaking them even in the second half when we weren't moving the ball. We were not running the ball. And that's a mystery. We ran the ball 6 times in the second half after all that success in the first half with Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jarek McKinnon.
Averaging about 7 yards a run.
7 yards a run. And the 6 times that we ran the ball in the second half were always in second and long situations that weren't on first down. We could have shoved the ball down their throat the way our offensive line was blocking. Yep. I mean, they were at the top of their game. It was the best game they played all season. They've had a lot of good games. Did you see that one where Cincinnati was sending a blitz over the center, and the guy got a running start on the snap, and Claude Humphrey still caught the guy and stopped him in his tracks?
Ran into a brick wall.
That's the most amazing block I've seen in the entire NFL all year long. I mean, he had a 10-yard head start, and Humphrey snapped the ball and stopped him in his tracks.
Yeah.
Trey, our right guard, Trey Smith, was pancaking people in the backfield. The offensive line was having a day. Mm-hmm. And why we were not running the ball just boggles my mind.
Especially when we were 3 yards away from the end zone.
Or 3 cracks at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And Eric Bieniemy was a running back and a offensive line coach, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Before he's been an offensive coordinator. And I don't think Bieniemy was calling plays. I don't think he was allowed to call the plays at the end there.
Or he had to call only certain plays. He might have been told not to run the ball. I don't know. But whatever happened was unbelievable. We had a 21-10 lead at halftime, something like that.
Yeah, it was 21-10.
And it should have been 28-10.
At least 24-10.
And yeah, at the very least. Why doesn't he go for the field goal and at least get the points out of it?
Yeah.
So again, there's a lot of people in Kansas City who do think the NFL fix was in. There are a lot of people in Kansas City that are very disgusted at what we saw.
See, if we had just lost, and it was a good game, and it wasn't so blatantly obvious, it'd be like, oh man, just wasn't our time, and it would suck still that we lost, but it wouldn't feel as bad as this does, because now it feels so bad that I just don't even want to watch the NFL anymore. not until they buy my trust back that they're actually playing these games with truth and with the unexpected as a possibility instead of what they've decided is going to happen.
Yeah, I don't want to think of the NFL as like we think of professional wrestling. It used to be back in the 40s and 50s. People thought wrestling was on the level, and maybe it was to some extent. People would get, in the 60s, people would get fighting mad if you say wrestling was fake. But I think wrestling figured out that you can fix your sport and make outcomes, as long as you have storylines and make it highly entertaining, people will still watch and people will keep coming back. They don't care if it's real or not. And that's kind of where we are at with professional wrestling today. Is that true of all major sports? Especially NFL football? This guy's got some arguments that are pretty strong. Once again, that website is fixesin.net.
And the very first bit of the game, in the first drive that the Chiefs had, when the official marked the ball about a yard and a half short of where it actually
That
was.
cost us a timeout.
That timeout was huge. If we had that timeout at the end of the first half, this would have been a different story. And I think the officials were told to screw with something right out of the gate, and I think they did that.
I think they may have been told that. I definitely, while I was watching the game, I told Lori, it's obvious the officials aren't calling anything. They're letting them play, which is the opposite of the first Cincinnati Chiefs game, where everything was totally tic-tac. The way they clean that up is to write the rules and officiate the games in such a way as that they have a tremendous amount of leeway in their calls. They can call ticky-tack passing interference calls. They can let people get away with pass interference, murder, and especially holding on the offensive line. His theory is that when you have a star quarterback like Tom Brady or a young up-and-comer like Pat Mahomes or Joe Burrow, referee crews will routinely be told not to call offensive line holding. If you look at videos, you could probably call holding on the offensive line on nearly every play. So that gives the NFL leeway to literally make those calls on critical third down plays or drive ending plays or drive extending plays that change the outcomes of games. And that's why it's gone that way, to give the league control over what happens on the field, to increase the chances of who they want to win
Mm-hmm.
and make more money. That's the bottom line.
And there's the Joe Mixon fumble. A lot of people think that's a fumble. It wasn't even reviewed. I think it was a fumble.
Were we out of reviews at that point?
I think it was within 2 minutes, so you couldn't challenge.
Oh yeah, the last 2 minutes. And another thing about Joe Mixon, I mean, like we totally threw away the running game, and in the overtime, Cincinnati went to Joe Mixon to run the ball down our throats, and that's why we lost.
Mm-hmm. And also on that same third down play that I mentioned earlier, they were blatantly holding Tyreek Hill for like 3 seconds, and there was no flag. And Patrick Mahomes, one of his first read was Tyreek Hill, but on that play, but there was no chance because he was being held. And then also, I forget what the next. I had another one I was going to bring up.
It will probably come to mind.
Yeah.
Cincinnati killed us with T. Higgins at with a lot of third down catches. They knew we could, our defensive backs are too short to cover him. He's kind of tall. And we had trouble covering tall receivers all through the year. Andy Reid did not adjust. Cincinnati rushed 3 in the second half and dropped 8. Again, that's more reason to be begging for the running game. You could always outnumber. When they're rushing 3 and dropping 8, you will always outnumber them and get at least 5 yards based on that alone.
Right. And the clock's your friend with a 2-score lead. This is football 101, like basic level, like Pop Warner coaches know this and do this. If you have a lead, you're going to run the ball.
Yeah, the whole goal of football is getting there the furthest with the fastest. And if you can't get there the furthest with the fastest, then you try to outnumber them. You get there with the mostest. And it's one of those two things moves the football. Nothing else does. And, why we did the same, the way we lost the conference championship game is really the same way we lost the game in week 17 with Cincinnati. We shut down the running game in the second half. And just, people around here are saying, well, it was Mahomes' head. But also, Andy Reid was not making adjustments in both those games and they both came down the same way, and he did not adjust. They went into the halftime thinking, what we're doing is working. Let's keep doing that. And Cincinnati goes into halftime saying, well, what we're doing ain't working. Here's our adjustment. We're going to make them adjust to us, and we didn't adjust to them.
Yeah, exactly. And in the post-game report with Andy Reid, hey Andy, did you think there was anything different that the Cincinnati defense was offering in the second half as opposed to the first half that sort of stymied you guys? No, they didn't really do anything different. It was the same looks.
They made a huge change.
Hey Patrick, did you think the Cincinnati defense was doing anything different in the second half that was different from the first half when you were absolutely crushing them? No, there was nothing different. I just didn't execute. I got to do better. I take the blame for this.
Any casual football fan can watch and tell that Cincinnati was not rushing as many players in the second half as they were in the first half. They were rushing mostly 3 and dropping 8. Yeah.
I'm at this point, like you can, as I said earlier, like every poor decision you can make was being made. And at this point, the only thing that I can do to reason with that is to just believe that it was on purpose, because any other reason is just absolutely blowing my mind. That
it doesn't make sense.
It does not make sense.
People are saying, well, during the offseason, they need to try to find out why Mahomes gets out of the game. We've seen that a few times. I don't know.
No, and they wanted him to make it look a little interesting and bring it to overtime to cover up what they've done. So Mahomes dialed his game up just a tad there on the last drive so that we could go get a field goal.
Yeah, but not score a touchdown, which was wide open, 1 yard deep in the end zone. That last play
multiple times.
That play alone would have given us the win. Instead of the field goal, we would have been 4 points up on them, and you just have like a couple seconds left.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say it was not on purpose. I'm kind of agreeing with Shaggy Shane, but for different reasons. I think it's just pro sports and the money in pro sports, the way it has been. They don't leave games up to chance when there's millions of dollars on the line. That's what he says. And so I encourage you to look at that website and just draw your own conclusions.